It's been just about 2 months since the release of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Pokemon Alpha Sapphire, and with that we can finally start looking ahead to the next Pokemon game. A lot of people, including myself, think Game Freak will take the traditional route and release Pokemon Z this year in 2015. If not Pokemon Z, then Pokemon X2 and Y2 to follow up from Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. What Game Freak are planning for this year is currently unknown, but what we can start to do is start looking ahead, start looking forward to the next Pokemon game, and this is going to be my top 5 list of the things that I want either improved or just generally in Pokemon Z or Pokemon X2 and Y2. In the comments below, I'm really interested in what you want in this title I'm going to tentatively call Pokemon Z, and 500 likes would be really appreciated, and I'll upload the next video, a video I hope you guys will want to see within the next couple of days. So what is up guys, my name is PIKACHU. Let's jump straight into this top 5 list. Coming in at number 5, this is actually something that in the grand scheme of things is pretty minor, especially compared to the rest of the things on the list, but it's just something I personally really want to see improved and think it's something that should be improved after this long. I want the GTS to be improved. The GTS has remained pretty much exactly the same since Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. This means that it's an 8-year-old system that has not been changed, and in this day and age, I honestly think the GTS is really lacking a lot of really important features. The fact that you can request event legendary Pokemon that are impossible to trade on the GTS and on other public trading services within the player search system is just stupid in my personal opinion. It means that a lot of the GTS is just clogged up with inane requests. You see a lot of requests for Celebes and I don't know, Meloettas, for simple Pokemon like, I don't know, Lanoons and stuff like that, and it's just stupid in my personal opinion. The GTS is in need of a pretty radical overhaul. It needs a lot of features, and it also needs filters to make it less clogged up of just trash, I guess. We're starting off this list with something that is pretty unimportant in the grand scheme of things, and honestly this is probably the most unrealistic thing on this list. I honestly doubt Game Freak are going to overhaul a system in the middle of a generation, but the GTS is a really useful tool for completing your national Pokedex, and it's a system I think really needs changes, and I could go on for a long while, but to save you guys from boredom, I'll move right on to number 4. Number 4 is something that I pretty much consider a formality at this point, especially after Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire introduced so many. But at number 4, I want more Mega Evolutions to be introduced in Pokemon Z or Pokemon X2 or Y2, depending on what Game Freak actually do. I don't know, there's a lot of Pokemon that I really want to see receive Mega Evolutions that haven't even, by the looks of things, been considered right now. I want Mega Evolutions for every single starter Pokemon. I'd really like to see Mega Evolutions for some more legendary Pokemon, and to see what Game Freak actually want to do with Zygarde, as Zygarde is really underpowered right now, especially compared to Yveltal and Xerneas. Both of them have some kind of advantage over Zygarde and a higher base stat spread. As I said, more Mega Evolutions is pretty much a formality, but it's just something I'd really like to see, especially for some of my more favoured Pokemon, and it's just something personal to me, but it's something I'm sure you guys can agree with. Coming in at number 3 is probably the most common complaint I see about Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. The original Kalos games really lacked a proper thought out after game. There wasn't much to do aside from breed for competitive Pokemon and to take on the battle maze on and your friends in Wi-Fi battles. Now compared to Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and heck even Pokemon Black 2 and Y2 which preceded Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, there was so much to do in the post game and it was just fantastic. In Pokemon Black 2 and Y2 there is a plethora of legendary Pokemon you could encounter and capture. There was the Pokemon World Tournament, and there was just so much more you could do. And in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, soaring was introduced, and you could capture so many legendary Pokemon, pretty much every single legendary Pokemon that wasn't in Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. So with such a high standard being set now for the post game. I want to see much more introduced in Pokemon Z, or the tentative title I'm calling Pokemon Z. I want to see Elite Four rematches. I want to see more legendary Pokemon. I'd ideally want to see a brand new area opened up, maybe similar to the Sevi Islands or something like that in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. I honestly don't want to ask for too much, and we've already received so many legendary Pokemon encounters in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that I don't think Game Freak are going to actually, I don't know, have many legendary Pokemon in the tentative title of Pokemon Z. But I just want a more thought out, expansive aftergame, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will agree with that. Coming in at number 2, I want the hidden areas, or areas that were pretty much unexplained and unexplorable in Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, to be opened up and explained in Pokemon Z. There were quite a few areas that were alluded to. For example, on Route 22, just to the east of Santaloon City, based on what NPCs said, there was a track for Rhyhorn racing. Your mum was a huge Rhyhorn racer, apparently. And I'm sure you guys are all really familiar with the areas in the power plant that were inaccessible. We all thought that area was going to be home to Volcanion, or an event that featured Volcanion, but Game Freak have really left us in the dark, and it seems like that area is just going to be left alone and never explained, and will never be explorable in the original Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, which really sucks in my personal opinion. Now, at the fear of perhaps sounding a little bit silly to you guys, I'd really love it if these areas and more were actually opened up. I'd love it if there was a little mini game where we could race Rhyhorns and stuff like that. Something maybe similar to Pokathlons, however, would be, I don't know, made out to be a bit more than that. You could perhaps follow in your mum's footsteps and become the best Rhyhorn racer of all time. That might sound a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it would be something that'd be really cool, and it's something that Game Freak don't need to do, but I just really like that. Of course, in Pokemon Z, we're probably going to see the Volcanion event at some point in its life cycle, so I'd really like it if there was some kind of in-game event where you could actually encounter Volcanion at the power plant after receiving the key for the inaccessible doors via mystery gift. To me, that would be better than just simply receiving the Pokemon, the event Pokemon, via mystery gift and receiving it in a Pokemon Center from some random NPC. It would just be a bit more rewarding in my personal opinion. I feel like I've went on a bit of a tangent with this point, maybe been a bit silly with my Rhyhorn racing, but yeah. I hope you guys can agree that I want these inexplorable, inaccessible areas to actually be opened up in Pokemon Z. There's a lot of hidden potential right there, and I don't know, I'd like to see Game Freak actually take advantage of it. I've sometimes said that Game Freak is really unambitious with their titles. However, in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they really went above and beyond with things like soaring and stuff like that, so I don't think this is too out of the realm of reality. Finally, for the number one thing I want in Pokemon Z, and it's not necessarily something that I physically want. At the risk of sounding negative, I really don't want Game Freak to take a step back from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Those two games featured so much content. There was soaring, there was secret bases, there was Pokemon contests, there was a plethora of legendary Pokemon you could encounter, there was the Dex Nav, there was every other feature within the Pokenav. There was so much, and as a YouTuber I saw so many complaints from people when they found out that character customization was not returning in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. We're at the risk of, and especially when we look at Game Freak's track record, of losing out on all these features in Pokemon Z and returning back to a game that doesn't have these features. And in my personal opinion, that would really suck after just how spot on Game Freak were with Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. There was just quite simply so much packed into that game, and it's not my nostalgia goggles speaking right here. Genuinely, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were probably the best Pokemon games to date, especially if you consider the amount of content that was in those games. I really want Pokemon Z to be a huge success for Game Freak, and I really don't want Pokemon Z to be a sidestep from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, or heck, even worse, a step back. I wanted to make improvements in leaps and bounds, and it's almost a formality that features like secret bases and Pokemon contests and heck even the Pokénav will be removed. I'm just slightly worried about what a game that comes after Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with so much content could be like removing them features. Bit of a negative last point, and I'm sure Game Freak are going to blow us away with what they have planned. It's just a tiny worry I've had since Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were actually released. In the comments below, I'm really interested in what you guys want most in Pokemon Z or X2 or Y2, depending on which route the Game Freak actually go. And 500 likes would be really appreciated, and I'll upload the next video hopefully tomorrow, but definitely as soon as possible. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.